The walls are closing in on Keir Starmer, and what just happened in the Supreme Court has sent shockwaves through Westminster that nobody saw coming. While the Prime Minister was busy telling the British people everything is under control, the highest court in the land just pulled the rug out from under his feet. This isn't just another political scandal that will blow over in a week. This is the kind of bombshell that brings down governments, and the timing couldn't be worse for Labour. The Supreme Court has spoken, and their decision is about to tear apart everything Starmer has been building since he walked through the doors of Number 10. Parliament is in chaos, his own MPs are turning on him, and the British public is waking up to a reality that's far more sinister than anyone imagined. What the judges revealed today isn't just embarrassing for the government, it's potentially criminal, and the implications are so massive that even Starmer's closest allies are running for cover. Forget everything you think you know about British politics, because what I'm about to reveal will show you just how deep this corruption goes and why the next few days could change Britain forever. The Supreme Court didn't just issue a ruling today, they dropped an atomic bomb on Keir Starmer's government, and the fallout is going to be catastrophic. At exactly 10:30 this morning, the justices delivered their verdict on a case that Labour had been desperately trying to keep quiet for months. We're talking about the controversial Rwanda deportation scheme. But here's the twist that nobody's talking about. The court didn't just say the policy was illegal. They uncovered evidence that senior government officials, people working directly under Starmer's orders, deliberately misled Parliament about the legal advice they'd received. Let that sink in for a moment. The highest court in Britain has essentially accused the Prime Minister's office of lying to the very institution that's supposed to hold them accountable. This isn't speculation or political spin. This is on the official court record, and it's devastating. The lead judge, Lady Justice Pemberton, didn't mince her words when she read out the decision. She stated clearly that the government had received multiple warnings from their own legal team that the Rwanda scheme violated international law, human rights conventions, and even Britain's own asylum regulations. But instead of being honest with Parliament, they buried those warnings, doctored reports, and pushed ahead anyway. Now, you might be thinking this is just about immigration policy, but you'd be wrong. This goes so much deeper than that. What the Supreme Court opposed today is a pattern of deception that calls into question everything this government has done since taking power. Because if they're willing to lie about something as serious as deportation policy, what else are they lying about? The evidence presented in court was damning beyond belief. Internal emails between Home Office officials and Downing Street staffers show a deliberate conspiracy to hide the truth from MPs who were voting on the Rwanda bill. One email, which was read out in court, literally says we need to make sure the legal concerns don't reach the committee stage, because if they do, we'll lose the vote. That's not politics as usual. That's a cover-up, plain and simple. And here's where it gets even worse. The court revealed that at least 3 senior civil servants raised red flags about the scheme and were promptly sidelined or transferred to different departments. One of them, a 20-year veteran of the Home Office, was forced into early retirement after refusing to sign off on a report that she knew contained false information. Her testimony to the court was absolutely explosive. She described meetings where officials were explicitly told to downplay legal risks and to present the Rwanda scheme as completely watertight when they knew it was anything but. The political earthquake this has triggered is unlike anything we've seen in modern British politics. Within hours of the ruling, 3 Labour MPs have already called for Starmer to resign, not just backbenchers either. We're talking about people who are supposedly loyal to the leadership. One of them, a former shadow minister, went on television this afternoon and said, and I quote, "I cannot in good conscience support a Prime Minister who has brought shame upon this office and lied to the British people." That's the kind of language you only hear when a government is collapsing from within. The opposition is having an absolute field day with this. The Conservatives, despite their own disastrous time in government, are calling for emergency debates, no confidence votes, and a full independent inquiry into what they're calling Labour's lies. Reform UK is demanding that Starmer be investigated by the police for misconduct in public office. Even the Liberal Democrats, who usually play it safe, are saying this could be the worst constitutional crisis since the Iraq War dodgy dossier. And they might be right, because the legal implications here are truly staggering. If government ministers knowingly misled Parliament, that's not just politically damaging, it's potentially a criminal offence under the Ministerial Code. And possibly even perjury if any of them gave false testimony to parliamentary committees. But here's what really has Westminster insiders panicking right now. The Supreme Court didn't just rule on the Rwanda scheme. They've opened the door to challenges against dozens of other government policies. In their judgment, the justices made it clear that they have serious concerns about the government's general approach to legal compliance and parliamentary accountability. But that's judicial language for we don't trust these people anymore. And once the Supreme Court loses confidence in a government's honesty, it creates a precedent that will haunt them for years. Every policy, every bill, every government statement will now be scrutinised with maximum scepticism. Opposition lawyers are already preparing legal challenges to everything from the government's NHS reforms, to their housing policies, to their employment laws. If they can prove that any of these were based on misleading information given to Parliament, we're looking at a cascade of defeats that could paralyse the government completely. Starmer's authority is hemorrhaging by the hour. This morning, he was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Tonight, he's a wounded animal surrounded by predators waiting for the right moment to strike. His own cabinet is in emergency meetings, and rumours are swirling that several ministers are preparing resignation letters just in case this gets even worse. The British public's reaction has been swift and absolutely brutal. Social media is on fire with people demanding accountability and transparency. The hashtag Starmer must go has been trending for hours. And it's not just the usual political activists. It's ordinary people who feel betrayed by a government they elected less than a year ago. Trust in politics was already at historic lows after years of Conservative scandals, Brexit chaos, and pandemic mismanagement. People voted for Labour because Starmer promised to be different. He promised integrity, honesty and competent government. Today's Supreme Court ruling has shattered that promise into a million pieces, and the anger out there is real. Phone-in shows are being flooded with callers expressing their disgust. Town halls are reporting unprecedented numbers of complaints from constituents. This isn't just a Westminster bubble story. This is cutting through to real voters in real communities, and that's what makes it so dangerous for Labour. When ordinary people start questioning whether their government is fundamentally dishonest, that's when governments fall. We've seen it happen before, and we're watching the early stages of it happening again right now. The details that emerge from today's court proceedings are so damning that even seasoned political journalists are struggling to find historical comparisons. The Supreme Court heard testimony from multiple whistleblowers, civil servants who could no longer stomach what they were seeing inside government departments. Their accounts paint a picture of an administration that knew exactly what it was doing and made a calculated decision to deceive Parliament anyway. One former Home Office lawyer testified that she was in a meeting where a senior political advisor, someone appointed directly by Number 10, told the legal team to find a way to make the Rwanda scheme work on paper, even if it doesn't work in reality. When she protested that this was essentially asking them to fabricate legal justifications, she was told that sometimes political necessity has to take priority over legal niceties. Those weren't her words. Those were the exact words spoken by someone in Starmer's inner circle, and they were recorded in her contemporaneous notes, which were submitted as evidence to the court. This is corruption at the highest level, and it's all coming out now because the Supreme Court has the power to demand documents that Parliament never gets to see. The Rwanda scheme itself was always controversial, but what we now know is that it was also completely unworkable from day one. The government signed an agreement with Rwanda that supposedly guaranteed the safety and fair treatment of asylum seekers who would be deported there. But internal Foreign Office assessments, which were kept secret from Parliament, concluded that Rwanda's human rights record was so poor that sending vulnerable people there would violate Britain's international obligations. These assessments were clear, detailed and unambiguous. They documented cases of arbitrary detention, torture and disappearances in Rwanda's immigration detention system. They warned that the Rwandan government had a track record of deporting people to countries where they faced persecution. They stated explicitly that there was no reliable monitoring mechanism to ensure the safety of deportees once they arrived. All of this information existed before a single vote was taken in Parliament, and all of it was deliberately hidden from MPs who were being asked to approve the scheme. That's not just bad judgment or political spin. That's a systematic campaign of disinformation carried out at the highest levels of government, and the Supreme Court has now exposed it for the world to see. What makes this even more explosive is the financial aspect of the scandal. It turns out that the government had already spent over £400 million on the Rwanda scheme before it was even properly implemented. That's nearly £500 million of taxpayer money on a policy that their own lawyers told them was illegal and unworkable. Where did that money go? The Supreme Court judgment includes references to contracts that were awarded without proper competitive tendering, consulting fees paid to firms with close ties to Labour politicians, and what one judge described as highly irregular financial arrangements that raise serious questions about procurement fraud. The National Audit Office is now launching an investigation into how these contracts were awarded, and early indications suggest this could become the biggest government spending scandal in decades. We're talking about money that could have gone to the NHS, to schools, to housing, being funneled into a scheme that everyone involved knew was doomed to fail. And the worst part is that they didn't care, because it wasn't about actually solving immigration problems. It was about political optics, about looking tough on immigration to win votes. Consequences be damned. The constitutional implications of today's ruling are profound and deeply troubling. Britain's system of government is built on the principle of parliamentary sovereignty and ministerial accountability. Ministers are supposed to be honest with the parliament, and if they're not, they're supposed to resign. That's the unwritten rule that's held the system together for centuries. But what happens when a government simply refuses to play by those rules? What happens when they lie, get caught lying, and then try to brazen it out anyway? Because that's exactly what we're seeing right now. In the hours since the Supreme Court ruling was announced, Starmer's response has been nothing short of insulting to the British people. Instead of accepting responsibility, instead of apologising, instead of promising to get to the bottom of what went wrong, he's gone on the defensive. His official statement was a masterclass in evasion and deflection. He claimed that the court's ruling was based on technical legal interpretations and that his government had acted in good faith throughout. He said that protecting Britain's borders was a complex challenge that required difficult decisions, and that he stood by those decisions. Not once did he acknowledge that his government had misled Parliament. Not once did he express regret for the civil servants who were pressured into compromising their integrity. Not once did he address the £400 million that's been wasted on this fiasco. The arrogance of that response has stunned political observers across the spectrum. Even commentators who are normally sympathetic to Labour are expressing disbelief at Starmer's refusal to take responsibility. One veteran political editor wrote this afternoon that Starmer appears to believe he can simply ignore the Supreme Court and carry on as if nothing has happened, but he's badly miscalculated the mood of the country. And that mood is angry, very angry. People are tired of being lied to by their leaders. They're tired of politicians who think they're above the law. They're tired of watching billions of pounds being wasted while public services crumble and ordinary families struggle to make ends meet. The Rwanda scandal has become a focal point for all of that frustration. And Starmer is now the face of everything people hate about modern politics. His personal approval ratings have dropped 15 points in a single day, according to one Snap poll. That's an unprecedented collapse, and it's only going to get worse as more details emerge. Because this story is far from over. The Supreme Court judgment runs to over 200 pages, and journalists are still working through it, finding new revelations with every paragraph. By tomorrow morning, there will be fresh headlines about meetings that were held in secret, documents that were destroyed, and officials who were threatened into silence. Inside Westminster, the atmosphere is absolutely toxic right now. MPs from all parties are in a state of shock, but Labour backbenchers are in a particularly difficult position. Many of them voted for the Rwanda bill based on assurances from the leadership that it was legally sound and morally defensible. Now they've discovered that those assurances were worthless, and they're furious about being made to look like fools. Several have already given interviews expressing their anger and disappointment. One newly elected Labour MP broke down in tears on camera, saying she felt betrayed by a leadership she had trusted and that she didn't come into politics to be part of a government that lies to the public. That kind of raw emotion is incredibly powerful, and it's spreading through the Labour ranks like wildfire. There are reports of shouting matches in parliamentary offices, of MPs confronting ministers and demanding answers, of WhatsApp groups full of panic discussions about what to do next. The party's internal discipline, which Starmer prided himself on maintaining, is collapsing in real time. Some MPs are openly talking about submitting letters of no confidence in the Prime Minister under Labour Party rules. If enough MPs do that, it triggers a leadership challenge, and given how fast sentiment is turning against Starmer, that's becoming a very real possibility. The cabinet is equally divided and dysfunctional. The Home Secretary, who was the public face of the Rwanda scheme, is reportedly considering resignation to save her own career. She's been in meetings with lawyers all afternoon trying to figure out if she can credibly claim she was misled by officials or if she's too deeply implicated in the cover-up. The Attorney General is in an even worse position because it was her job to ensure that government policy was legally compliant, and the Supreme Court has just said that it wasn't. There are serious questions about whether she gave accurate legal advice to the Cabinet or whether she was pressured into softening her warnings. If it's the latter, she'll be seen as having failed in her constitutional duty. If it's the former, she's complicit in the deception. Either way, her position is untenable. The Chancellor is trying to distance himself from the whole mess, claiming that he only dealt with the financial aspects and wasn't involved in the policy decisions. But that's not going to wash because he signed off on spending £400 million on the scheme. He's going to have to explain to the public why he thought that was a good use of their money, and there's no good answer to that question. The Foreign Secretary is facing calls to resign for failing to properly assess Rwanda's human rights situation, and the Justice Secretary is being accused of not pushing back hard enough when government lawyers raised concerns. The pressure on Starmer himself is becoming unbearable. This evening, he's supposed to face Prime Minister's questions in a special session that's been called to address the Supreme Court ruling. It's going to be a bloodbath. The leader of the opposition is already preparing a devastating line of attack, and Starmer will have nowhere to hide. He can't blame the previous government because Labour has been in power long enough to take responsibility for their own decisions. He can't blame civil servants because the evidence shows that civil servants were trying to stop this disaster and were overruled by political appointees. He can't even fall back on the usual excuse of we're learning lessons and moving forward because the scale of the deception. And it's too great for that kind of platitude. The British public wants accountability and they want it now. There are already calls for criminal investigations into whether any government ministers committed misconduct in public office or breached the Official Secrets Act by hiding legal advice from Parliament. The Metropolitan Police are being pressed to open an inquiry, and while they're traditionally reluctant to get involved in political matters, the evidence laid out by the Supreme Court is so serious that they may have no choice. If police do start investigating, it would be absolutely unprecedented to have serving cabinet ministers under criminal investigation, but that's where we're heading. The international reaction has been equally damaging for Britain's reputation. Our closest allies are watching this scandal unfold with a mixture of concern and embarrassment. The European Union has issued a statement expressing serious concerns about the rule of law in the United Kingdom and suggesting that any future cooperation agreements will need to include stronger oversight mechanisms. That's diplomatic language for we don't trust the British government anymore. The United States State Department has declined to comment officially, but sources in Washington are saying that the Biden administration is deeply uncomfortable with what's happening and is privately urging Starmer to get his house in order before it damages the special relationship. Even the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has weighed in, saying that today's Supreme Court ruling validates their long-standing concerns about Britain's asylum policies and calling for a complete overhaul of the system. For a country that used to pride itself on being a beacon of democracy and the rule of law, this is humiliating. Britain's soft power, its ability to influence global affairs through moral authority rather than just military or economic might, is being eroded with every passing hour of this crisis. So, other countries are pointing to the Rwanda scandal as evidence that Britain has lost its way, that Brexit broke something fundamental in the country's political culture, and that the government can no longer be trusted to keep its word. The media coverage has been relentless and universally critical. Even newspapers that normally support Labour are running devastating front pages. The headlines tomorrow morning are going to be brutal. We're seeing phrases like government in crisis, Supreme Court destroys Starmer's credibility, Labour's lies exposed, and Britain's shame. Television news programmes are dedicating entire broadcasts to analysing every aspect of the scandal, bringing in constitutional experts, legal scholars and former politicians to dissect what went wrong, and the consensus is damning. This is being compared to some of the worst moments in British political history: the Profumo affair, the Westland scandal, the Iraq War dossier. One historian said on air this evening that this could be the moment when Starmer's premiership became unsalvageable, and that's a hell of a statement to make about a prime minister who's only been in office for a few months. The 24-hour news cycle is normally quite forgiving because stories move on quickly, but this one has legs. There are too many unanswered questions, too many potential criminal offences, too many angry people demanding justice. This is going to dominate the headlines for weeks, possibly months, and every day will bring new revelations that make the government look worse.